The wind at Eagle's Point was unforgiving that evening, whipping through the pine trees with a hollow moan that seemed to carry whispers of warning. I should have listened. I should have trusted the cold dread that had settled in my stomach the moment our son, Daniel, suggested we take this family trip to celebrate my husband, Richard's 60th birthday. But you don't suspect your own flesh and blood. You don't look into the eyes of the child you nursed, the boy you taught to ride a bicycle, the young man you sent off to college with tears streaming down your face, and see a murderer. I was wrong. "Mom, Dad, come closer to the edge," Daniel called out, his voice cheerful, his smile wide. "The sunset is incredible from here. I want to get a photo of you both." Richard squeezed my hand, his weathered palm rough against mine after 37 years of marriage. "Come on, Margaret, let the boy take his picture." I hesitated. Something felt wrong. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Daniel's girlfriend, Veronica, stood several feet back, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She'd been cold to us throughout the entire trip, barely speaking during dinner, checking her phone obsessively. "I don't like heights," I said, laughing nervously. "You know that, Danny." "Just for a second, Mom, please, for Dad's birthday?" The way he said please sent a chill down my spine. It was too earnest, too desperate. But Richard was already walking toward the cliff's edge, and I followed because that's what wives do, that's what mothers do. We trust, we follow, we believe in the goodness of those we love. We stood at the edge, the canyon dropping away beneath us into a seemingly endless abyss of shadows and jagged rocks. The dying sun painted the sky in shades of blood orange and deep purple. It was beautiful, I'll admit, terrifyingly beautiful. "Perfect," Daniel said, and I heard something in his voice that made me turn. He wasn't holding his phone anymore. His hands were raised. And then those hands, the hands I had held when he took his first steps, the hands I had bandaged when he fell off his bike, the hands I had clasped in prayer at his wedding, those hands shoved us, both of us, at the same time. The world tilted. Richard's scream mixed with mine as we tumbled backward off the cliff, our fingers desperately reaching for each other, for the edge, for anything solid. I saw Daniel's face above us, twisted into something I didn't recognize, something monstrous and hollow. And then we were falling. "Pretend we're dead!" Richard's voice cut through my terror, his words a desperate whisper shout as he grabbed my arm and pulled me toward him mid-fall. I didn't understand. My mind was chaos. My body was weightless. Death was rushing up to meet us. But somehow, impossibly, Richard's words penetrated the fog of fear. We hit the first outcropping about 15 feet down, a narrow ledge covered in thick brush and accumulated debris. The impact knocked the wind out of me, sent pain shooting through my left side like liquid fire. Richard landed half on top of me, his body cushioning part of my fall, and I heard him grunt, felt his body go rigid with agony. We rolled, slid, tumbled another few feet before catching on a tangle of roots and brush that had somehow taken hold in the rocky cliff face. "Don't move," Richard breathed, his voice barely audible. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." Above us, I heard footsteps, then Daniel's voice. "Did you see where they landed?" Veronica's response was clinical, detached. "I can't see anything. It's too dark down there." "Should we climb down and check?" "Are you insane? That's a 100-foot drop. They're dead, Daniel. No one survives that." Silence. Then Daniel's voice again, and this time I heard something that shattered what remained of my heart. Relief. Okay, good. Let's get back to the car. We need to establish our alibi. Remember, we left them here to watch the sunset. They must have slipped. We're devastated. We're in shock. "I know the plan," Veronica snapped. "I came up with it." Their footsteps retreated. An engine started somewhere in the distance. Tires crunched on gravel, and then silence. I lay in the darkness, clinging to a ledge barely wider than my body, my husband bleeding beside me, and I wept without sound. Our son had tried to kill us, and we had survived. The pain came in waves, each one more brutal than the last. My left arm was broken. I could feel the bone grinding against itself whenever I tried to move. My ribs screamed with every breath. Blood trickled down my face from a gash somewhere on my forehead. But I was alive. "Richard," I whispered, reaching for him in the darkness. "Richard, are you—" "I'm here." His voice was strained, weak. I think my leg is broken." I found his hand and clutched it, feeling his fingers wrap around mine with desperate strength. We lay there in the dark, on that impossible ledge, listening to each other breathe. "How did you know?" I asked, finally. "How did you know there would be a ledge?" "I didn't." His voice cracked. "I saw it a split second before he pushed us. When I turned to look at him, I saw the ledge below. It was the only chance." "And pretending to be dead?" "I knew he'd check. I knew he'd want to make sure." Richard coughed, and I heard the wet rattle in his chest that told me his injuries were worse than he was admitting. "Our son? Our Danny? He tried to kill us." The words hung in the air, impossible and undeniable. "Why?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Part of me had known for months, ever since the reading of my mother's will, ever since Daniel learned that he wasn't the sole heir to the family fortune. My mother, Eleanor Vanderburg, was a wealthy woman. Old money, oil money, land that had been in our family for generations. When she passed away 6 months ago, she left everything to me, nearly $12 million in assets, stocks, and property. Daniel had expected to inherit directly. He'd been grandmother's favorite, her golden boy. But my mother had seen something in him in her final years. In one of our last conversations, she gripped my hand with surprising strength and whispered, "Don't let Daniel control the money, Margaret. Promise me. There's something wrong with that boy, something cold." I had dismissed her words as the ramblings of a dying woman. I had defended my son. How wrong I had been. "The inheritance," Richard said, echoing my thoughts. "It's the inheritance." He couldn't wait. He knew we were planning to change our will, to put the money in a trust he couldn't touch until he turned 50. We had made that decision last month after discovering Daniel's gambling debts, $300,000 owed to people who didn't send polite collection notices. We'd bailed him out once before, 5 years ago, and he had promised, sworn on his grandmother's grave, that he was done. He had lied. We confronted him last month, told him we knew about the debts, told him we would help him one final time, but only if he went to rehab, only if he agreed to the trust. He had agreed. He hugged us, thanked us through tears, told us we were the best parents anyone could ask for. And then he had started planning our murder. "We need to get help," I said, trying to assess our situation. The ledge was narrow, barely 4 feet wide, covered in brush and loose rocks. Above us, the cliff face rose impossibly steep. Below us, darkness waited. Richard shifted, groaned in pain. "My leg. Margaret, I can't feel my left leg anymore." Fear gripped my heart. "What do you mean you can't feel it?" "It's numb. Everything below the knee. I think it's worse than I thought." I crawled toward him, ignoring the screaming pain in my own body, and ran my hands down his leg. My fingers found wetness, warmth, blood, so much blood. "You're bleeding badly," I said, keeping my voice steady, even as panic clawed at my throat. "We need to stop it." I tore strips from my cardigan, working in the darkness, and fashioned a makeshift tourniquet around his thigh. Richard hissed through his teeth, but didn't cry out. "That's my girl," he whispered. 37 years, and you're still saving my life." "Don't talk like that. We're going to get out of this. We're going to survive." "Even if we do, then what? We go to the police? Turn in our own son?" The question hung between us, heavy and terrible. "He tried to kill us, Richard." I know, but he's our son, our Danny. I remember the day he was born. I remember holding him, counting his fingers and toes, promising him I would always protect him. And he pushed us off a cliff. Richard was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was hollow. "Where did we go wrong, Margaret? What did we do to make him into this?" I didn't have an answer. I had spent years asking myself the same question. Daniel had always been different, more selfish, more calculating, more prone to lies. But I had excused it as childhood phases, teenage rebellion, young adult struggles. I had refused to see the pattern because seeing it would mean accepting that my child was not the person I had raised him to be. Mothers are blind when it comes to their children. We have to be. The alternative is too painful to bear. "We didn't do this," I said finally. "We loved him. We gave him everything. If there's something broken in him, it was broken long before we could have fixed it." "Veronica knew," Richard said. "She was part of it. She helped plan this." "She's after the money, too. They must be in massive debt. The gambling, her lifestyle, they're drowning." "So they decided to drown us instead." I looked up at the stars emerging in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, our son was driving away, rehearsing his grief, preparing to play the devastated child who lost both parents in a tragic accident. And we were trapped on a ledge, broken and bleeding, with no phone, no supplies, and no way to call for help. "Richard," I said, a thought occurring to me, "the ranger station. You said it was 3 miles from the trailhead." "About that, yes." "If I can climb up, if I can get to the trail—" "Margaret, no. Your arm is broken. You can't climb in the dark. You'll fall." "I have to try. You're losing blood. If we wait until morning, you could—" "Die?" He laughed bitterly. "Margaret, I'm 60 years old with a shattered leg and what I suspect is internal bleeding. I was dying the moment we hit this ledge." "Don't say that. Don't you dare say that." "I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. But if one of us can get out of here, it has to be you. I'll slow you down. I'll get you killed." "I'm not leaving you." Richard reached up and touched my face, his palm warm against my tear-streaked cheek. "I'm not asking you to leave me. I'm asking you to get help. Go when the sun rises. Climb up, find the trail, get to the ranger station, send someone back for me." "And if you die while I'm gone?" "Then I die knowing you have a chance to survive. That's all I want, Margaret. I want you to live." We held each other through the long night, shivering in the cold, listening to the sounds of the wilderness around us. Coyotes howled in the distance. Owls called to each other across the canyon. The wind whispered through the pines above us like the voices of ghosts. I told Richard I loved him over and over until the words felt inadequate. 37 years of marriage condensed into those 3 syllables. Every fight we'd had, every reconciliation, every moment of joy and sorrow, all of it distilled into I love you. I crawled toward him, ignoring the screaming pain in my own body, and ran my hands down his leg. My fingers found wetness, warmth, blood, so much blood. "You're bleeding badly," I said, keeping my voice steady, even as panic clawed at my throat. "We need to stop it." I tore strips from my cardigan, working in the darkness, and fashioned a makeshift tourniquet around his thigh. Richard hissed through his teeth, but didn't cry out. "That's my girl," he whispered. 37 years and you're still saving my life." "Don't talk like that. We're going to get out of this. We're going to survive." "Even if we do, then what? We go to the police? Turn in our own son?" The question hung between us, heavy and terrible. "He tried to kill us, Richard." I know, but he's our son, our Danny. I remember the day he was born. I remember holding him, counting his fingers and toes, promising him I would always protect him. "And he pushed us off a cliff." Richard was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was hollow. "Where did we go wrong, Margaret? What did we do to make him into this?" I didn't have an answer. I had spent years asking myself the same question. Daniel had always been different, more selfish, more calculating, more prone to lies, but I had excused it as childhood phases, teenage rebellion, young adult struggles. I had refused to see the pattern because seeing it would mean accepting that my child was not the person I had raised him to be. Mothers are blind when it comes to their children. We have to be. The alternative is too painful to bear. "We didn't do this," I said finally. "We loved him. We gave him everything. If there's something broken in him, it was broken long before we could have fixed it." Veronica knew. She was part of it. She helped plan this. "She's after the money, too. They must be in massive debt. The gambling, her lifestyle, they're drowning. So they decided to drown us instead." I looked up at the stars emerging in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, our son was driving away, rehearsing his grief, preparing to play the devastated child who lost both parents in a tragic accident. And we were trapped on a ledge, broken and bleeding, with no phone, no supplies, and no way to call for help. "Richard," I said, a thought occurring to me, "the ranger station, you said it was 3 miles from the trailhead." "About that, yes." "If I can climb up, if I can get to the trail—" "Margaret, no. Your arm is broken. You can't climb in the dark. You'll fall." "I have to try. You're losing blood. If we wait until morning, you could—" "Die?" He laughed bitterly. "Margaret, I'm 60 years old with a shattered leg and what I suspect is internal bleeding. I was dying the moment we hit this ledge." "Don't say that. Don't you dare say that." "I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. But if one of us can get out of here, it has to be you. I'll slow you down. I'll get you killed. I'm not leaving you." Richard reached up and touched my face, his palm warm against my tear-streaked cheek. "I'm not asking you to leave me. I'm asking you to get help. Go when the sun rises. Climb up, find the trail, get to the ranger station, send someone back for me. And if you die while I'm gone, then I die knowing you have a chance to survive. That's all I want, Margaret. I want you to live." We held each other through the long night, shivering in the cold, listening to the sounds of the wilderness around us. Coyotes howled in the distance. Owls called to each other across the canyon. The wind whispered through the pines above us like the voices of ghosts. I told Richard I loved him over and over until the words felt inadequate. 37 years of marriage condensed into those 3 syllables. Every fight we'd had, every reconciliation, every moment of joy and sorrow, all of it distilled into "I love you." I crawled toward him, ignoring the screaming pain in my own body, and ran my hands down his leg. My fingers found wetness, warmth, blood, so much blood. "You're bleeding badly," I said, keeping my voice steady, even as panic clawed at my throat. "We need to stop it." I tore strips from my cardigan, working in the darkness, and fashioned a makeshift tourniquet around his thigh. Richard hissed through his teeth, but didn't cry out. "That's my girl," he whispered. 37 years and you're still saving my life." "Don't talk like that. We're going to get out of this. We're going to survive." "Even if we do, then what? We go to the police? Turn in our own son?" The question hung between us, heavy and terrible. "He tried to kill us, Richard." I know, but he's our son, our Danny. I remember the day he was born. I remember holding him, counting his fingers and toes, promising him I would always protect him. "And he pushed us off a cliff." Richard was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was hollow. "Where did we go wrong, Margaret? What did we do to make him into this?" I didn't have an answer. I had spent years asking myself the same question. Daniel had always been different, more selfish, more calculating, more prone to lies, but I had excused it as childhood phases, teenage rebellion, young adult struggles. I had refused to see the pattern because seeing it would mean accepting that my child was not the person I had raised him to be. Mothers are blind when it comes to their children. We have to be. The alternative is too painful to bear. "We didn't do this," I said finally. "We loved him. We gave him everything. If there's something broken in him, it was broken long before we could have fixed it." Veronica knew. She was part of it. She helped plan this. "She's after the money, too. They must be in massive debt. The gambling, her lifestyle, they're drowning. So they decided to drown us instead." I looked up at the stars emerging in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, our son was driving away, rehearsing his grief, preparing to play the devastated child who lost both parents in a tragic accident. And we were trapped on a ledge, broken and bleeding, with no phone, no supplies, and no way to call for help. "Richard," I said, a thought occurring to me, "the ranger station, you said it was 3 miles from the trailhead." "About that, yes." "If I can climb up, if I can get to the trail—" "Margaret, no. Your arm is broken. You can't climb in the dark. You'll fall." "I have to try. You're losing blood. If we wait until morning, you could—" "Die?" He laughed bitterly. "Margaret, I'm 60 years old with a shattered leg and what I suspect is internal bleeding. I was dying the moment we hit this ledge." "Don't say that. Don't you dare say that." "I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. But if one of us can get out of here, it has to be you. I'll slow you down. I'll get you killed. I'm not leaving you." Richard reached up and touched my face, his palm warm against my tear-streaked cheek. "I'm not asking you to leave me. I'm asking you to get help. Go when the sun rises. Climb up, find the trail, get to the ranger station. Send someone back for me. And if you die while I'm gone, then I die knowing you have a chance to survive. That's all I want, Margaret. I want you to live." We held each other through the long night, shivering in the cold, listening to the sounds of the wilderness around us. Coyotes howled in the distance. Owls called to each other across the canyon. The wind whispered through the pines above us like the voices of ghosts. I told Richard I loved him over and over until the words felt inadequate. 37 years of marriage condensed into those 3 syllables. Every fight we'd had, every reconciliation, every moment of joy and sorrow, all of it distilled into "I love you." He told me stories from our past, memories I had forgotten. The time we got lost on our honeymoon in Paris and ended up at a tiny restaurant where we couldn't read the menu. The look on my face when I held Daniel for the first time. The way I laughed at his terrible jokes, even when they weren't funny. We talked about Daniel, too. Not the monster he had become, but the child he had been. His first words, his first day of school, the Christmas morning when he woke us at 4 a.m., too excited to sleep, the proud smile on his face when he graduated from law school. Where had that child gone? When had he slipped away and been replaced by this creature of greed and violence? Maybe he was always like this, Richard said as the first gray light of dawn crept into the sky. Maybe we just didn't want to see it. I saw it, I admitted. Sometimes, little moments. Cruelty he tried to hide, lies he told too easily. But I explained it away. I made excuses. We both did, because he was our son, because we loved him. Do you still love him? Richard was quiet for a long time. I love who he was supposed to be. I love the potential that was wasted. But the man who pushed us off this cliff? He shook his head. I don't know that man. I don't know if I ever did. The sun rose, painting the canyon in shades of gold and rose. In the daylight, I could finally see the extent of our situation. The ledge was even narrower than I had thought, barely clinging to the cliff face. Above us, the rock wall rose nearly vertical for about 20 feet before angling back slightly toward the top. Richard looked terrible. His face was gray, his eyes sunken. Blood had soaked through the makeshift bandage on his leg. Go, he said. Now, while you have the light, you need to move. I kissed him long and deep, memorizing the feel of his lips against mine. I'll be back, I promised, with help. Just hold on. I'm not going anywhere, he smiled weakly. I love you, Margaret Vanderburg Morrison, in case I forgot to mention it. I love you too, Richard Morrison, and I'm going to save you, and then we're going to make our son pay for what he's done. With those words fueling my determination, I began to climb. Every inch was agony. My broken arm screamed with each movement, each handhold. My ribs grated against each other. My vision blurred with pain and exhaustion. But I climbed. I climbed because Richard was depending on me. I climbed because our son thought he had won. I climbed because I refused to die on a cliff in the middle of nowhere while Daniel cashed in on his crime. The rock face was unforgiving, offering few handholds and even fewer places to rest. Several times I slipped, my feet scrabbling against loose stone, my heart stopping as I imagined the fall that would end everything. But I didn't fall. Somehow, impossibly, I didn't fall. It took me nearly 2 hours to climb 20 feet. By the time I reached the top, my fingernails were torn and bloody, my clothes shredded, my body trembling with exhaustion. I collapsed at the edge of the trail, gasping for breath, staring at the sky. I had made it. Now I just had to walk 3 miles to the ranger station, with a broken arm, with cracked ribs, with no water, no food, and barely enough strength to stand. I stood anyway. The trail wound through the forest, dappled with morning sunlight. Under other circumstances, it would have been beautiful. Now it was just an obstacle, 3 miles of suffering that stood between Richard and rescue. I walked. I fell. I got up. I walked some more. Time became meaningless, measured only in footsteps and pain. I talked to myself to stay conscious, muttering about Daniel, about Veronica, about all the warning signs I had missed. The phone calls he dodged, the mysterious trips he took, the way his eyes shifted when he talked about money, the growing coldness in his demeanor, the impatience he barely concealed when we visited. I remembered a conversation from 3 months ago, shortly after my mother's funeral. Daniel had asked, casually, too casually, about the terms of our will, who inherited what, how the assets were divided. I had told him not to worry, that everything would come to him eventually. He was our only child, after all. His eyes had lit up at those words. At the time, I thought it was gratitude. Now I knew it was calculation. He had been planning this for months, maybe longer, waiting for the right moment, the right opportunity, and we had handed it to him on a silver platter, a family trip to a remote location, a scenic overlook with a deadly drop, no witnesses. The perfect murder. Except we had survived, and now I was going to destroy him. The ranger station appeared through the trees like a mirage, a small wooden building with a green truck parked outside. I stumbled toward it, my strength finally giving out, and collapsed against the door. "Help!" I croaked, pounding weakly. "Please, help!" The door opened, and a young ranger stared down at me in shock. Ma'am, what happened?" "My husband, Cliff, Eagles Point, he's still down there." And then everything went black. I woke in a hospital room, my arm in a cast, my ribs wrapped, machines beeping around me. A police officer sat in a chair by the door, and a doctor was checking my vitals. "Richard, my husband." "They found him," the doctor said quickly. "He's alive, in surgery now, but alive. You did it, Mrs. Morrison. You saved his life." The relief was overwhelming. I wept, great heaving sobs that shook my broken body and sent pain radiating through every nerve. Richard was alive. We had survived. Now came the hard part. The police officer introduced himself as Detective Marcus Webb, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a weary expression. He asked me what happened at Eagles Point. I told him everything, every word, every detail, every moment of horror and betrayal. He listened without interruption, his face growing increasingly grave. When he finished, he sat back and let out a long breath. "Mrs. Morrison, your son filed a missing persons report this morning. He claims you and your husband wandered off during the sunset hike and never returned. He's been organizing search parties, talking to the media. He seems very distressed." "He's performing," I said flatly. "He's a lawyer. He's good at playing a role. I understand this is difficult." "Difficult?" I laughed, and it came out harsh and broken. "Detective Webb, my son pushed me and my husband off a cliff because he wanted our money. He left us to die. He's not distressed. He's disappointed that his murder didn't work." Detective Webb studied me for a long moment. "We'll need to investigate fully. Right now, it's your word against his, without witnesses, without evidence. Check his phone records, check Veronica's, check their finances. You'll find the gambling debts, the desperate situation they're in. You'll find the motive. We will. I promise you we will. But I need to warn you, cases like this, family against family, they're complicated. A jury might not want to believe a son could do this to his parents. Then we'll have to make them believe." Richard came out of surgery that evening. His leg had been saved, though he would walk with a limp for the rest of his life. The internal bleeding had been severe, and the doctor said if I had been even an hour later, he would have died. 1 hour. Our son had come 1 hour away from committing the perfect murder. When Richard woke, I was there, holding his hand just as I had on that ledge. "We made it," I whispered. He turned his head and looked at me, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "Daniel?" "The police are investigating. They know everything." Richard closed his eyes. "What happens now? Now we fight. Now we make sure he never hurts anyone again." "He's our son, Margaret." "No." My voice was cold, colder than I had ever heard it. He stopped being our son the moment he pushed us off that cliff. Whatever connection we had, whatever love remained, he severed it. He made his choice. Now we make ours. The investigation moved quickly once the detectives started pulling at threads. Daniel's finances were a disaster, nearly $500,000 in gambling debts, creditors threatening legal action, his law firm on the verge of discovering his embezzlement of client funds. Veronica's situation was even worse. She had been shopping with money that didn't exist, maintaining a lifestyle built on lies and borrowed time. Together, they were drowning, and they had seen my mother's inheritance as their life raft. The police found texts between them, carefully deleted but recoverable, discussing the plan. They hadn't named us directly, they weren't that stupid, but the implications were clear. It has to look like an accident. The insurance will cover the debts and then some. After tomorrow, we'll be free. When Daniel was arrested, he denied everything. He claimed the texts were taken out of context, that we had slipped, that he and Veronica had tried to find us in the dark but couldn't see where we had fallen. But his performance faltered when he was confronted with the evidence. The tourniquet I had made from my cardigan, torn in a way consistent with deliberate removal rather than a fall. The scratch marks on the edge of the cliff that showed we had tried to grab on. The testimony of an elderly hiker who had seen Daniel and Veronica leaving the trailhead, not searching frantically as grieving children would, but walking calmly, holding hands, getting into their car, and driving away. Veronica broke first. Facing the possibility of a life sentence, she turned on Daniel with the same cold efficiency she had shown in planning our murder. "It was his idea," she told the prosecutors. "All of it. He said they would never change the will, that they would donate everything to charity rather than let him have it. He said we had no choice." Daniel's lawyer tried to paint us as the villains, controlling parents who had driven their son to desperation, who had dangled wealth over his head and then threatened to take it away. No one believed it. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified, recounting every moment of that terrible evening. Richard testified from a wheelchair, his voice steady despite the emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. We looked at our son across the courtroom, and he looked back at us with eyes that held no remorse, no love, nothing but cold fury at being caught. "Do you have anything to say to your parents?" the judge asked Daniel before sentencing. He stood slowly, straightening his tie, and for a moment I saw a flash of the charming boy he had once pretended to be. "They deserve what they got," his voice carrying through the silent courtroom. "They controlled everything. My whole life I was their puppet, dancing on their strings. The money should have been mine. Grandmother promised me. They stole it. They—" "That's enough," the judge interrupted. "Mr. Morrison, I've heard many excuses in my courtroom. Yours are among the most pathetic. Your parents gave you everything: love, support, education, opportunity, and you repaid them by trying to end their lives." The judge sentenced Daniel to 25 years to life for 2 counts of attempted murder. Veronica received 20 years. As the bailiffs led Daniel away, he turned and looked at us one final time. His mask had slipped entirely now, revealing the monster that had always lurked beneath the surface. "This isn't over," he mouthed. I held Richard's hand and watched our son disappear through the courtroom doors. It was over. And it was just beginning. The first year was the hardest. Richard's physical recovery was long and painful. The limp never fully went away, and cold weather sent aches through his leg that kept him up at night. My arm healed crooked despite the surgeries, and I never regained full strength in my left hand. But the physical wounds were nothing compared to the emotional ones. I dreamed about the fall every night.
I would wake up gasping, reaching for the ledge that wasn't there, screaming Richard's name into the darkness. I saw Daniel's face everywhere, in crowds, on television, in the faces of young men who bore even a passing resemblance. Richard withdrew into himself. He stopped going to his weekly poker game with friends. He stopped reading, stopped watching his favorite shows, stopped doing anything except sitting on the porch and staring at the mountains in the distance. We both went to therapy, separately and together. We learned words for what had happened to us: trauma, PTSD, survivor's guilt. We learned that healing wasn't linear, that some days would be worse than others, that it was okay to fall apart as long as we eventually put ourselves back together. Slowly, painfully, we began to rebuild. We sold the house where Daniel had grown up, unable to look at his childhood bedroom, his photographs on the walls, the chair where he had sat during holiday dinners. We moved to a smaller place by the coast where the sound of the waves drowned out the echoes of his voice in our heads. We donated a significant portion of the inheritance to charity, causes that helped victims of violent crime, organizations that supported families torn apart by betrayal. The money that Daniel had killed for, the money that had destroyed our family, now went to helping others heal. I wrote letters to Daniel in prison. I never sent them. They were for me, not for him, a way of processing the anger, the grief, the impossible love that still flickered somewhere in my heart despite everything he had done. "Dear Daniel," one letter began, "I wonder sometimes if I ever really knew you, the boy who learned to ride a bicycle in our driveway, who cried when his goldfish died, who told me I was the best mom in the world. Was that real? Or was it always an act, always a performance to get what you wanted?" "Dear Daniel," another letter said, "I tried to hate you today. I looked at the scars on my arm and thought about what you did, and I tried to hate you with every fiber of my being. I couldn't. I don't know if that makes me strong or weak." "Dear Daniel," a third letter concluded, "I forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying this hatred is too heavy, is breaking my back, drowning my soul. So I'm letting it go. I'm letting you go. You are no longer my son. You are a stranger who hurt me very badly, and strangers don't have power over me anymore." After I wrote that letter, I burned them all. The ashes scattered in the wind, carried out to sea, and I felt something loosening my chest. 3 years after the trial, I received a letter from the prison. Daniel had been attacked by another inmate. He was in the hospital, in critical condition. The prison was required to notify next of kin. I stared at the letter for a long time. Richard found me still sitting there an hour later, the paper crumpled in my hands. "What is it?" he asked. I told him. He was quiet for a long moment, then, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know." "Do you want to see him?" "I don't know." We sat together in silence as the sun set over the ocean, the same colors as that evening at Eagles Point, but now they brought peace instead of pain. "He's dying," I said finally. "Our son is dying." "He stopped being our son 3 years ago. You said so yourself." I know, but I struggled to find the words. There's a mother in me that can't turn off, that remembers holding him when he was born, remembers the weight of him in my arms, remembers the way he smelled like powder and milk. That mother is screaming at me to go to him. And what does the rest of you say? I thought about it, really thought about it. The rest of me says he made his choice. He chose money over family, greed over love. He would have watched us die without remorse. Why should I give him my presence now when he needs me most? "Maybe," Richard said slowly, "that's exactly why you should go." I looked at him in surprise. "Not for him," Richard continued, "for you. You spent 3 years finding closure, finding peace. But there's still something unfinished, isn't there? Something that won't let you go completely." He was right. As much as I had healed, as much as I had moved on, there was still a piece of me that was stuck on that cliff, falling through the darkness, seeing my son's hands raised against me. I need to look him in the eyes, I said. I need to see if there's anything left of the boy I raised, and if there isn't, I need to know that too. Richard nodded. Then go. I'll be here when you get back. I flew across the country the next morning. The prison hospital was cold and sterile, filled with the sounds of machines and the smells of antiseptic. Daniel was in a private room, handcuffed to the bed despite his condition. He looked terrible, thin, gray, aged beyond his years. The attack had left him with internal injuries that would take months to heal, if he healed at all. When he saw me, his eyes widened. "Mom?" I sat in the chair beside his bed. I didn't reach for his hand. I didn't touch him at all. "I got the letter," I said. "I came." "I didn't think—" He trailed off, then tried again. "I didn't think you would." Neither did I. We sat in silence for a long moment. Outside the window, birds sang in a tree, oblivious to the tension in the room. "I'm sorry," Daniel said finally. I waited. "I know that doesn't mean anything. I know it can't undo what I did, but I'm sorry for everything." "Why?" I asked. "Why are you sorry? Because you got caught? Because you're lying in a hospital bed, handcuffed like a criminal? Because your life has turned out exactly as badly as you deserve?" He flinched at my words. "No, I'm sorry because I had the best parents anyone could ask for, and I destroyed everything. I'm sorry because I can't remember when I became this person, but I know it wasn't your fault. I'm sorry because I'm going to die in prison, and the last thing I'll remember is the look on your face as you fell." Tears streamed down his cheeks. For the first time in 3 years, I saw something in his eyes that might have been genuine. "I loved you," I said. "I loved you more than anything in the world. You were my miracle, my joy, my reason for living. And you threw it all away for money." "I know. Money that you never would have gotten anyway. Money that I would have given you freely if you had just asked, if you had just been honest with me about your problems." "I know. I was too ashamed, too proud, too stupid." "Yes, you were all of those things." I stood up. "I'm not going to forgive you, Daniel. Not in the way you want. What you did is unforgivable. But I'm not going to carry you anymore either. You're not my burden. You're not my failure. You're a grown man who made choices, and now you're living with the consequences." "I understand." "I hope you do. I hope you spend whatever time you have left thinking about what you could have done, what you threw away. I hope it haunts you." I walked to the door, then paused. "Goodbye, Daniel. I won't be coming back." "I love you, Mom." The words hung in the air between us. 3 years ago, they would have destroyed me. Now, they were just sounds, empty and meaningless. "No, you don't," I said. "You never did. You don't know how to love anything except yourself." I walked out of the hospital and didn't look back. Daniel died 2 weeks later. Complications from his injuries, the prison officials said. His heart simply gave out. I didn't go to the funeral. There was no funeral. He had no one left to mourn him. Veronica was still in prison. His friends had long since abandoned him, and we had made it clear we wanted nothing to do with his remains. He was cremated, and his ashes scattered in an unmarked location. It should have brought me closure. It should have felt like justice. Instead, it felt like nothing at all. I thought I would feel something, I told Richard that night, sitting on our porch watching the stars emerge over the ocean. "And what do you feel?" "Empty. Like something that was there for so long is suddenly gone, and I don't know how to fill the space."
Richard took my hand. "Maybe you're not supposed to fill it. Maybe you're supposed to let it be empty. Let it heal over like a wound. Is that what you feel?" He was quiet for a moment. "I feel grateful. Grateful that you survived. Grateful that we survived. Grateful for every day we have together. The rest, the anger, the grief, the betrayal, I've let it go. It was killing me holding on to it. How did you let it go? I decided that he wasn't going to take anything else from me. He took 3 years of my life, 3 years of recovery, of nightmares, of looking over my shoulder. He took my trust in other people, my faith in the goodness of the world. He took enough. I refused to let him take my peace. I leaned against his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "I love you," I said. "I love you too." We sat together as the moon rose over the water, casting silver light across the waves. Somewhere in the distance, a whale breached, its massive body arcing against the sky before splashing back into the depths. Life went on. It went on despite everything that had happened, despite the betrayal and the pain and the impossible grief. The sun rose and set, the seasons changed, the world continued spinning, indifferent to our suffering. And slowly, gradually, we continued with it. We traveled to places we had always wanted to see. Paris, where we got lost again and laughed about it this time. Tokyo, where we ate strange foods and watched the cherry blossoms fall. Cape Town, where we stood at the edge of a cliff and held each other, reclaiming something that had been stolen from us. We made new memories to replace the poisoned ones. We learned to trust again, to hope again, to believe that not everyone we loved would hurt us. We adopted a dog, a scruffy mutt we named Phoenix, who followed us everywhere and slept at the foot of our bed. We volunteered at a shelter for victims of domestic violence, sharing our story with women who had been betrayed by those they loved most. We lived. 10 years after that evening at Eagles Point, I sat on a stage at a survivors conference telling my story to an audience of 1,000 people. Our own son pushed us off a cliff to silence us. My husband whispered, "Pretend we're dead." Those words saved our lives. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. But survival is only the beginning. The real work comes after. The healing, the rebuilding, the impossible task of learning to trust again when trust has been shattered. I looked out at the faces before me. Some were tear-streaked, some were nodding in recognition. Some bore the scars of their own betrayals, their own impossible stories. I'm here to tell you that it's possible. It's possible to come back from the worst thing that can happen to you. It's possible to find joy again, to find love again, to find peace again. I smiled, and it was genuine, unforced, earned. My husband is in the audience tonight. We've been married for 47 years. 10 of those years have been spent healing from what our son did to us, and I can honestly say that we are happier now than we've ever been. Richard waved from his seat in the front row, his eyes shining with tears and pride. Not because of what happened, but in spite of it. We chose not to let our son's evil define the rest of our lives. We chose to take back our story, to write a new ending. I paused, letting the words sink in. You can do the same. Whatever you've been through, whoever has hurt you, they don't get to write your ending. Only you can do that. I stepped back from the podium to thunderous applause. Later, as Richard and I walked hand in hand through the parking lot, Phoenix trotting beside us, I looked up at the stars. The same stars I had watched from that ledge the night I thought I was going to die. We made it. Richard squeezed my hand. We made it. And we walked toward the car, toward home, toward the rest of our lives, together.